Well, hello and welcome back to Critical Weight Theory, where we sometimes cut through the noise to get to what really matters. Although sometimes I do look at fluff topics and do movie reviews and stuff like that, music explorations, but sometimes I dig into philosophy and politics and issues in the news and all that kind of stuff as well. So today we're talking about something that hits at the core of modern life, how in an age overflowing with scientific progress, we are still so vulnerable to misinformation and disinformation. So misinformation is false information that is spread mistakenly, and disinformation is done intentionally, often as sort of a campaign to basically spread lies and make people believe in things that are not true. So, why, despite living in a time when AI can write symphonies and scientists can edit genes, do conspiracy theories, pseudoscience, and so called alternative facts still shape our public discourse? The short answer is that it's complicated, but the long answer, that's where things get interesting. And I will go over some of the possible alternatives, the solutions to some of the problems that we are currently facing. So let's start here in this ongoing battle over truth and reality. Education and critical thinking have become the front lines. Universities and research institutions are still, even now, producing world changing discoveries at an incredible pace, yet certain interests are trying to get in the way and defund these universities and these studies, and in some cases, just totally go in a non scientific and potentially deadly direction. But the pipeline between breakthrough and public understanding is clearly broken, and that's one of the main reasons this is actually happening. Too often, that knowledge gets locked away in academic journals or buried under jargon, and the public, left without access or context, becomes easy prey for manipulation. And I feel a little odd saying this because I'm not really a scientist myself. I barely even count as an armchair scientist. But nonetheless, I at least understand what is going on here. The digital media age is a problem. It's a little ironic when you can access quality information in a more easy way than ever before in the past, yet so many people are feeling induced to seek out garbage information, frankly. And social platforms promised to democratize information, but the algorithm seemingly had other plans. What gets rewarded isn't accuracy, it's engagement. And the most engaging content, outrage, fear, division, and frankly, a lot of far right fascistic propaganda. Truth has been outpaced by virality. The result, we get echo chambers, a warped information ecosystem, an infodemic, as the World Health Organization has called it, and really a lot of an us versus them attitude that really didn't exist nearly as much just 20 years ago. And I would know a little bit because I existed 20 years ago as somebody who's in his 40s at this point. I can say that surely things are different from how they were not that long ago. In fact, when I was first introduced to the internet in the 1990s, I would say back then it seemed a little more benign. Now I understand some of the sort of anti hype against the internet and social media, and why some people might even just want to step away from it, shut it down, and maybe never even look back. But I'm going to propose that it doesn't have to get to that extreme, and I'm going to even list some possible organizations that you can support if you want to sort of uh, understand the issues and really support science in the process. So when people lose trust in institutions, they look for answers elsewhere, and that's where superstition, pseudoscience, and conspiracy theories find fertile ground. We've seen the consequences: climate change denial, anti vax movements, flat earth theories, QAnon, a lot of bizarre and often disgusting theories, many of which started off as the fringe but have become shockingly mainstreamed. And they're all built on the rejection of evidence and, yes, expertise. Now, I do want to say there's nothing necessarily wrong about questioning what an expert says, but you also have to understand that sometimes experts really are experts. And it's similar to, you know, the fact that if you're having a plumbing problem, well, you might just call a plumber. It's instead of trying to fix everything yourself. If you don't have the tools, you don't have the knowledge. And the same principle applies to scientific issues. And sure, in some cases it's debatable about whether scientific progress is actually progress or not, but it's safe to say that sometimes it probably should be regarded as such. And Ecclesiastes tells us that in much wisdom is much grief, but in much ignorance there's danger. This isn't just a philosophical dilemma, it's a practical crisis with real world fallout. Public health, environmental stability, social progress, all is on the line. And I'm trying to have a hopeful tone here. It's not all doom. There is a countercurrent. There are people fighting back. You have grassroots movements, science communicators, teachers, organizations dedicated to making science accessible, understandable, and most importantly, relevant. In order to advance these things, they have to seem relevant to people's lives. And I will provide examples of such organizations toward the end of the episode. And if you really want to learn those organizations, of course, you might do a Google search yourself, but I'm going to list a few of them here later on. And they're teaching 21st century skills, media literacy, critical thinking, digital skepticism. They're building what we desperately need: a culture that values inquiry over certainty and evidence over dogma. Because only by fostering that mindset, only by empowering people to ask better questions, can we hope to turn the tide. And as one academic paper put it, superstition isn't just irrational, it's a survival mechanism born out of desperation. So that makes the irrational appear more rational, I would say. I'm adding that to that little observation. And if we want to break the grip of the superstition and the irrationality, we need more than facts. We need connection, clarity, and courage. That hope, that belief in a better informed, more thoughtful society, it admittedly may sound naive, but it's necessary. Sometimes you don't just shrug something off because it might sound like it's too unattainable, or like it might be a fantasy in itself. No, sometimes you just have to stick with something and promote a message and a cause, and maybe you'll break through. You have to sometimes start out small, and sometimes things have to you know get bigger after that initial point where you're not in charge of things, or however you want to put it. You're not in charge of I guess, the dialogue or the narrative. And sometimes things have to get worse before they get better. So, here, as promised, are several standout organizations that are actively working to make science more accessible, engaging, and trustworthy. So, Science Connected is a volunteer powered nonprofit that translates research into plain language science news and educational materials. Focused on underserved communities, they publish an open access online magazine and create free K through 12 resources to improve science literacy and fight misinformation. And that is scienceconnected.org. There's also Society for Science and the Public, known for leading initiatives like science news learning and nationwide STEM competitions. They deliver curricula, grants, and school programs to boost science literacy and nurture future STEM leaders. And that is societyforscience.org if you want to check them out online. There's also Science Buddies. It offers free online tools and mentoring for K through 12 students designing science fair projects. With over 12 million students and teacher users, they connect learners to real scientists and the latest research. And I'm gonna throw a bit of a curveball in here. I'm gonna say Wikipedia. Now I know there's sort of a stereotype against Wikipedia because anybody can edit it. You could have tons of false information in there. And sometimes there is false information. I'm not going to lie about that. But they do have plenty of dedicated people who do try to keep the information accurate. And if you want to look into that, you can. They do keep the logs of the decisions make the decisions that they make in terms of editing for, I think, just about every article. You can access that information so you can see the actual debates that some of these people engage in. But also, Wikipedia has a truly deep wealth of information, including, if you're living in a small town, for example, you could probably look up some of your town's history, and it would probably be pretty accurate. And that's not something you can find everywhere online. The Wikipedia page is potentially valuable in that way because it can sometimes actually preserve information you might not even find anywhere else. So another source is SciStarter. That's SCI Starter. It's a platform that links the public to 1,200 plus vetted citizen science projects worldwide. It breaks down barriers to, or it breaks down barriers so non-scientists can contribute meaningfully to real research. So that sounds like a really good one. There's the National Center for Science Education, or the NCSE. They're focused on preserving and improving science education, especially evolution and climate science. It supports teachers, parents, and communities working to uphold evidence based curricula. You also have Skype a Scientist, which matches classrooms with volunteer scientists through video calls. The aim is to humanize science, inspire trust, and allow students to ask whatever is on their minds. And it's free and global. So that sounds like a good one. Science from Scientists offers hands on STEM presentations and science theater to schools and community groups. Scientists bring experiments like elephant toothpaste to life and promote engagement. So that's sciencefromscientists.org if you want to look that up online. And Public Lab is a community driven nonprofit empowering local stakeholders to monitor environmental health using DIY open source tools, especially active in underserved communities confronting pollution or environmental threats. And there are some more initiatives worth mentioning: the Association of Science Technology Centers, or ASTC, and Science Festival Alliance. These groups support public engagement through science museums, outreach festivals, and community programming around the US. And here's another valuable thing that should be mentioned: PBS and NPR. So donations to PBS and NPR stations have actually increased significantly following proposed funding cuts. Now I don't know if those funding cuts have gone through, but it's good news that people are actually stepping up to address the possible loss of funding. So roughly 120,000 new donors have contributed an estimated $20 million in annual value, and overall donations are up about $70 million compared to last year. This surge is giving this surge in giving is a direct response to the potential loss of federal funding, with some stations reporting dramatic increases in donations, according to Inside Audio Marketing. And other sources, there's BioBus and GenSpace, New York City based nonprofits bringing hands on biotech and lab experiences to underrepresented students. There's Science Communication Lab, a network of filmmakers and researchers creating documentaries and films that contextualize science stories for broader audiences. You can reach that at sciencecommunicationlab.org. There's the Question of Science Institute in Brazil that promotes critical thinking and rational public dialogue in Brazilian contexts, combating science denial in politics and media. There's the Pan African Citizen Science eLab, which connects thousands across Africa to astronomy research and environmental monitoring projects. Uh, so that's obviously pretty good. And well, that's about it. I assume I could have found more, but you get the idea. You've got a pretty good list, a solid list of resources here already. So thanks for listening. If the episode sparked something for you, feel free to share it, start a conversation, and question everything. Until next time, stay curious, stay sharp, and keep thinking.